Hey guys, what's going on? Riley Morgan here, and today we're going to be installing this swing arm from datshopnyc on my Onyx RCR. So in order to install the swing arm, the first thing we're going to need to do is remove the old one. And the first thing I'm going to do in that process is remove these pegs and then remove my screws holding on my torque arms. So I removed the pegs, I removed the nuts that were holding on the torque arms on both sides. I can't get the bolt out just yet, so I'm gonna wait until the next step and pull that off. But for now, I'm gonna cut the zip ties here and the tape that's holding my phase cables and my brake line onto the swing arm. So I cut the zip ties and anything that was holding my brake line and phase wires. And now that I've cut and removed those, I can go ahead and remove the brake caliper, the rear brake caliper. And mine is held on with some 5mm Allen keys. I've got some spacers left over and I removed my brake caliper. I'm gonna save these spacers for later. So the next step is we're gonna remove the chain from the bike. So I'm gonna swing the bike around to shoot the close up. So I spun the bike around and I found the master link on the chain. You can tell because it's got these pins sticking out of it. It looks different than all the other ones. In order to loosen this, we need some slack on the chain. So we'll need to loosen the rear axle nuts. Scoot the wheel forward a little bit and then get back to removing the chain. So I'm just removing these with a normal crescent wrench. Now as I do this on the other side, it's really important to avoid the phase wires and make sure you don't damage the phase wires with your wrench. Pull off these nuts, then I'll be able to slide the axle forward a little bit so I can loosen the chain. So you find the master link and you're gonna use this tool, grab it together, and that just popped by itself. Usually you have to pull it. If you're doing this at home and you don't have a stand or you don't have a bunch of C-stands, you're going to want to remove the crank arms and the whole assembly here so that you can lay the bike on its side when you want to put the swing arm on. I do have some stands, so we're probably going to use those. However, if you want to take these off, which you should if you're going to lay the bike down, there is a pin in here that you can loosen and then we can remove the whole assembly. So let's go ahead and do that. So now that that's loose, you should be able to knock it out using like a rubber mallet, or it should fall out honestly, but my bike has been through a little bit, so it's a little stuck. Once the pin is removed, this can fall off and the whole pedal assembly can slide out on the other side. And now you can lay the bike over without worrying about it. We're actually in my studio today, so we had a lot of C-stands sitting around and we decided to raise the back tire with some C-stands. The next thing to do would be to remove the phase wires from the controller. My phase wires are already routed outside. They're on this Sabaton controller that's here. So I'm gonna loosen the straps and the dual lock and remove those phase wires. I'm gonna unplug my hall sensor. This is what your hall sensor connector looks like. The motor has two of these connectors. One of them is usually got a cover on it. It's a spare. I've never had to use my spare, so I'm still on the first set. So you just kind of squeeze at the sides and you should be able to unplug it. And now we're gonna do the phase wires. So I managed to move my speed controller a little out of the way. So that's everything from the motor. All right, so now that that is done, I'm gonna go ahead and fully remove the rear wheel. It looks so funny. Now that my wheel has been removed, I'm gonna remove the shock mounts from the bottom here, and then I can go and remove these bolts that hold the swing arm on. You're gonna probably wanna grab the bolt from the back with a wrench or some vice grips, and then use like a drill or impact driver or something with the correct Allen key head to remove these 4 bolts. All right, so the swing arm has been removed. This is the old swing arm. It is pretty dirty where the swing arm hatches down here. So we're just gonna go ahead and wipe that off. If you had some grease, you could put it in there, but I don't, so we're not. The original piece that held the swing arm in is going to be used again to mount to the Datshop swing arm. It'll sit like that. And then we can get the same exact bolts that we're holding it on before and put them back. Okay, so we've got the swing arm on the old bracket. It's mounted well. All the screws have pretty equal tension. It's really important to make sure they're all super tight and they all have the same amount of tension. You can tell we did a good job because it's very stiff. So now I'm gonna go ahead and start putting my shocks back on, and the shocks mount to these holes right here. Now we can put the wheel back on, yay. So we've slid the rear wheel into place, and now we can put the torque stays on top of that. Now I'm gonna put these screws onto the torque plates there. It's an M6 head on the kit I've got here. The next thing I'm gonna do is install the rear brake. You're gonna have to use a brake adapter. There are different types of brake adapters that work better for different types of brakes. You'll have to measure and figure out which one is right for you. But I'm using this one from Shimano for a 203mm rotor. And basically it mounts like so. And then you can mount your old brake to the top of it and it'll sit like that. So I got all of that set and it's still loose. There's still some play. So I'd like to do the chain now. And then once the chain is in place, I can start adjusting tension on everything, including the wheel itself. But now, when we go to check the chain tension and we put the chain on, it's obviously significantly shorter. Doesn't reach. That shop provides this chain extension here. Basically, you're going to want to extend your chain using this and a master link. So now our chain is on and it's a little loose, so I'm just going to slide that full tension. So now I'm putting the Loctite on the axle, and I'm going to put these axle nuts back on. I'm using some blue Loctite. You should really use some orange Loctite if you don't foresee yourself messing with this or taking the wheel off in the near future. Orange is honestly what you're supposed to be using. I don't have any, and I check my bolts pretty frequently, and the hardware store is like really far. Now I'm going to have one person hold the wheel back. He's keeping the wheel square. He's eyed it to make sure it's centered. You want to make sure that it's centered on the swing arm. You don't want it sideways. So you don't want to ride sideways. So while he's got centered, I'm going to start tightening. That's not going anywhere. You have to say that's not going anywhere, otherwise it will go somewhere. They're going in the ass. All right, so we've got that in place. And now we can go ahead and really tighten down our torque arms. I'm gonna throw this back on. Just put that there, and we've got the pin. We'll put the pin back in. That's all assembled. The next thing that I'm going to do is check that my phase wires reach. And it looks like they actually reach. I wasn't expecting them to. They probably won't on your bike. So there are some provided phase wire extensions. So basically you get these 3 extensions, and what you'll do is attach them to your existing phase wires, tighten that all the way down. You don't want any flex, because any flex between a connection is arcing and sparking and breaking your controller. And then they're nice color coded. Oh man, I went ahead and I used the yellow one on the green wire, but these are all color coded. I'm not going to use them because I don't need to, but you would extend them this way and you'd put some heat shrink. You'd heat shrink the connection, and then once that's done, there is a second heat shrink. So you want to double it up, and that's it for the phase wires. As for the hall sensor, there's an extension here. There you go. You got yourself a hall sensor extension. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to reconnect all my phase wires the same way they were connected before and reconnect my hall sensor. Okay, so now I'm going to tighten the rear brake setup here. We've got the rear brake set up, as you can see. If you spin the wheel, hit the brake, it locks pretty good. We've got our side panels buttoned up, our controllers back in place, our phase wires are where they should be. Hall sensor is connected. You could have extended it if you needed to, but we didn't need to. All this fit. The last thing to do is get our kickstand. The kickstand is going to be reused from the old Onyx swing arm. There's a bolt here that you'll want to undo, and basically we'll undo that. Be very careful that the spring doesn't pop off and hit you. We'll undo the bolt Careful of the spring, and we'll transfer it over to that swing arm. All right, so we've got the kickstand in place. It works. Let's turn the bike on, make sure it still works. And we're done. Thank you guys for watching. I don't know. I'm not good at this part. Bye.